Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Data Security for a Remote Work Environment in 2021 and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Danny Ramey. I'm the editor of Mission Critical Communications, and I'll be moderating the webinar today. Sierra Wireless and Access Wireless Data Solutions are the webinar sponsors. We have some excellent information and several expert presenters scheduled for you today. We'll include time at the end of the webinar for questions from attendees and do our best to wrap up the webinar in an hour to be courteous of everyone's time. Our first expert is Thomas Nick Colasaco, Director of Internet of Things for Access Wireless Data Solutions. Thomas began his career in telephony in 1990 when he joined the U.S. Army Signal Corps. His time with the military sharpened his skills in designing and developing the telecommunications switch that provided voice and data for tactical situations. He began his civilian career in 1997 with Time Warner Communications in Denver, Colorado. His initial responsibilities were as a complex translation specialist who built customer translations such as phone lines and trunk groups. His career progressed to manager of the Maintenance National Operations Center. Thomas transferred to Florida in 2003 to support the Tampa TW Telecom sales team as a network application engineer. His extensive knowledge and experience in telecommunications made him an invaluable asset when he came aboard at Access Wireless Data Solutions in 2013 as the Director of IoT. He has since developed the AWDS Tier 1 support team for the cellular data company and has provided networking and sales support for the AWDS team and its customers. Our second presenter is Dan Robinson, U.S. Southeast Regional Sales Manager for Sierra Wireless, focusing on public sector government business in that region. Dan has a long and distinguished career in public safety and sales spanning more than three decades. Dan began his career as a police officer in Michigan and worked his way through the ranks to serve as the chief of police for the Lincoln Charter Township, Michigan Police Department. After retiring from local law enforcement in 2000, Dan served as the Law Enforcement Coordinator, Regional Program Manager for the U.S. Department of Transportation, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration in Atlanta, Georgia. After retiring from government, Dan changed career paths as he leveraged his public safety experience to move into the private sector. Over the past 16 years, Dan has served in various sales management roles, including as a sales director managing public safety sales for NICE Systems, and with AtHoc, a division of BlackBerry, where he managed the commercial, state, and local government sales in North America. Dan earned his Bachelor's of Science degree in Criminal Justice from Siena Heights University in Adrian, Michigan. Thomas, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Dan and Mission Critical, for letting us share our observations and experiences with you today. Thank you, Dan and Sierra Wireless, for partnering with us to help out our clients over the past couple of years as we were working together to make a difference to help out everybody. As Danny mentioned, I am Thomas. I joined Access Wireless a little over 6 years ago. I have an extensive background in the landline and networking aspects of technology, and that brought an experience to partner with our founder, Dave's 30 years of cellular experience. It helped move AWDS forward with 3G, 4G, and the cellular data world began to explode. Our founder, Dave Schwartz, opened shop back in 2009. We're headquartered in Tampa, Florida. We have a great local presence, but we're able to handle international and have a global reach. We've remained at the vanguard of the cellular evolution from 2G to 3G, 4G LTE and beyond, and now into 5G by connecting our clients with cutting-edge technology with our partners like Sierra Wireless. AWDS has created a workplace that builds on customer-focused relationships. We build it, thus our slogan, work with a partner, not just a vendor. We offer a level of service that starts with understanding and fulfilling our clients' needs and building a long-term relationship. Next slide, please. As AWDS focuses our efforts on a client and the build and their network, we maintain a level of expertise in the cellular networking to ensure the correct product and or application is sold to reduce our customers' pains and create efficiencies in the workflows to help save dollars and in infrastructure requirements. For the initial customer contact, we'll get you on the phone and have a video chat or even just an email, whatever is convenient for you, to find out what your pain points are. Ask you questions about, other things, and may uncover different issues that are in your network that you don't know, and just do a overall consultative call to start the consultation. We can then tailor a solution Based on choices from you, we will work with the carrier to get to your devices activated. And once that's done, once the activation is completed, we can then provision the device by creating things such as your Wi-Fi passwords or different IP schemas that are standard that may vary from your particular network. So we can set those up and put them into the device so that once we drop it in the mail, we are plug and play when you receive it. Plug and play meaning all you really have to do is attach the power, Ethernet cable, and a couple of antennas, and you're ready to go. The follow-up on that is we will continue to support you through your implementation and with any troubles in the network that you may have, as well as future technologies that may help you with other issues that you come up with or may realize along the way. Next slide, please. Access Wireless and Sierra have had a partnership for a little over 9 years. Dave has known the gentleman, the premier partners from Sierra for quite a while and has been in with them for a long time and helping them out. So when he began business 9 years ago, it was kind of brought to play that we should do business together. We've sold a little over 45,000 products in the course of that time, beginning with the 2G devices. We helped sell some of the Ravens that then went away when they upgraded from the Pinpoints and now into some of their newer series that Dan will talk about a little later. With that, Access Wireless is branched into a little over 35 different markets, so there's nothing that we can't reach, from mission critical type first responders and police to remote applications, lighting towers or SCADA units out in the field testing water. Access Wireless is able to touch on many applications, so we like helping our customers that way. Next slide, please. So our presentation today is a little bit about yesterday, today, and tomorrow. These are some of the pain points that our clients have described to us, issues we've helped them to overcome. These are some of the observations and technologies and requests that we are getting today, but this is by no means all inclusive of some of the remote issues, but rather highlighting a few to get us started. This presentation is going to be in part about working remote. Such a huge portion of the traditional workforce is now shifting, and at least to split in-office to out-of-office times. Some scenarios that may work in your network and what comes next, and then here's what we're going to cover. So next slide, please. Some of the technical challenges that we've observed from our consultations over the while are technical challenges, operational challenges, and implementational challenges. So these challenges are from shifting of previously full office buildings to environments either partially or fully remote. And based on our clients' experiences, we've kind of put the most concerning as technical challenges. Monitoring and maintaining secure device connections, you're making sure your data is safe, wanting your IT management to be able to oversee your home users. There is then dealing with the devices going offline due to network disruptions, local coverage gaps, don't know where your employees' networks are. You could have operational challenges, such as things like tracking the different devices, keeping inventories of the carriers, SIM cards. This becomes extensive as well, where you have so much for just a couple of remote users. And then finally, there's implementational challenges. You can send a box and have your employees install it, but how does that happen? You know, do they have the expertise? Do you have to send an IT staff out to do this? So those all become things that you have to look at. What do you do in-house to make it simple for your remote users? How do you program one device for multiple carriers out there? And different kinds of things. It takes 2 minutes to load a web page because all of a sudden in the afternoon when everybody comes home, you're there, and that's where cellular networks can make a little bit of a difference. So we're here to help you with some of those and overcome some of those. So the next slide, please. Security security today is a major issue when it comes to remote workforce. I think everyone understands here how critical it is, but let's talk a little bit about why. Having secure devices is critical to preventing the loss and damages. In terms of real-world examples, it could look like an interruption of critical controls, such as pressure valves. It could be sensitive property or proprietary information. It could be, personal information, such as credit cards. I'm sure y'all remember Target a couple of years ago and the issue that happened there. And so we'll bring that up a little bit later on some of the ways that we can correct some of these security issues. But I want to put it that's one of the main concerns that we're brought up with is how do you secure a remote user back to the corporate network? So the next slide, please. Some of the things, this is just a quick slide to show you some of the numbers that we've found out there. And there's a big thing you see, the percentages are the representative of devices being attacked or actually being victims of a security breach. We all know that employee emails are something that we all look at because it's in-house and we can see that. However, that can be controlled with application type encryption, which we'll talk about a little later. But I brought this slide up because of some of the other things like the Internet of Things devices, IoT devices. What are they? Data center servers are usually connected or protected via large, robust firewalls, but does that stop somebody from coming in through a smaller device and getting into there? So we'll talk about segmenting networking, employee devices. If they're not secure, how do you as an IT director sitting at home, sitting at your office, make sure that your remote user's network and their home network is all secure? So these are things that we've realized, but I just wanted to share this as some of the percentages that they're actually relatively high in comparison to some of the other areas. So it's just an area to pay attention to. Next slide, please. Some of the things that we can do to establish more secure networks. These are what we've come up with as some of the key, and again, not all inclusive, but private networking or private LTE networking, private virtual networking, segmented networks, and application encryption. We'll talk about each of these in the next couple of slides, but the way that they're based here, this was kind of a hierarchical way of looking at it from the smallest level of an application encryption at your email level, all the way down to having your own private network, or all the way up to having your own private network, how you want to look at it. So each of these are ways that with our cellular devices, with Sierra's online platform, we can help you to establish and create these efficiencies to get your remote users connected faster. Next slide, please. Private LTE. There's a lot of buzzwords about private LTE and what is private LTE. And in generality, private LTE is having basically your own cellular network in your office. Where this comes into play a lot is some of the large campus environments or take, for example, an airport environment or a large mining area. Wi-Fi is only so good. You have to have Wi-Fi repeaters every so often. Cellular is a little stronger, a little bit different devices, and a little bit more encrypted, a little bit safer. With a private LTE, it was brought about because of the adaptation or the use now of what is called CBRS. That's Citizens Broadband Radio Service, not to be confused with CB radios. This is a whole new area. It's a spectrum of the 3.5 gigahertz to 3.7 gigahertz. It's a spectrum that's actually been used for quite a while by cable companies and satellite companies and the Navy, U.S. Navy ship-to-shore radar. But because this frequency was so seldomly used, the government came out and said, why can't we put some rules around the usage of it and put it out for public use? So they created 3 tiers, which is the first tier, which is the incumbent, which is what I spoke about, the satellite providers and the Navy. Being an incumbent, they have overall access to the spectrum all the time. Underneath that is what's called a PAL, which is basically a pay-to-play. You can actually buy a license, get a 10 megahertz spectrum range out of that 3.5 to 3.7, which is yours to use exclusively. And when you use it, you can utilize all the bandwidth in it, unless, of course, the incumbent decides to use their data, at which point they can override. The third tier is the generally available, which is kind of where the private radio falls into. And that generally available tier is utilized through our carriers or carrier manufacturers to create radio equipment for 5G. And since they're creating it for 5G, they could go ahead and sell it to the private network. You utilize a private SIM, you utilize end user equipment, and the whole thing works like your own private cellular radio. Where this would be good, I think Dan will touch points on it a little later, is some of the here we have today requirements for some end users that have to get data in a wide variety of areas where it's very diverse to get data. And this is one way that they can do it either publicly or privately, but it's called private because it's not utilizing the carrier's networks. So that's the high level. It's a great way if you can afford it. It's not necessarily the cheapest way, but it's a great way to create your own private network to overcome some of the inefficiencies of Wi-Fi, and also some of the inefficiencies and distances that can't be reached with landlines. So with that, next slide, please. We'll move on to talk a little bit about virtual private networks. I'm sure everybody out there is pretty familiar with what a VPN is. A VPN is exactly what it says, virtual. It overrides usually the public network, sometimes several public networks, to get from an endpoint to a server farm, or from an endpoint to get to an endpoint. And the reason we're bringing this up is because for remote users, VPNs are almost a natural way to establish a connection for that remote user to get in and let the IT director know, let you guys know that there is inherently some encryption, there is some security going on. It's great about VPNs is that with our cellular devices that Dan will go over today, a lot of that can be done either on the device itself, directly at the end user, or it can be done through a web browser interface, through an online management, which I think we'll talk about a little later as well. And the simplicity of it is that you can do plug and play, and you can have several VPNs up and running in a matter of minutes now with some of these technologies, versus going in and having an end user that is unfamiliar with technology and walking him over the phone of, set up your IKE key here, set up your IP address here, okay, shake your hand here. A lot of these users that get in and use email, they don't understand some of the technologies. So our secure wireless devices kind of help efficiently deploy that scenario for those users. So the next slide, please. We're going to move on and talk a little bit about segmenting networks. Now, this kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier with the target. Target, I don't know what everybody remembers now because it seems like it's been so long ago, but it was such a great story that their air conditioning units were actually hacked, and because the air conditioning units were hacked, the hackers were actually able to get into the general network, or the overall corporate network, and find proprietary information from their users, and financial information from the corporation, and credit cards and everything else. So after that, it came out that VeriQuest, independent research company, has found that 100% of us IT professionals say that networking segmentation should be utilized and is very essential, but only about less than a quarter of our companies actually use it. And sometimes it's just because it's troublesome when it comes sometimes to finding your issues and where data is not flowing, what's blocking it from one network to the other. However, when you realize the security once it's up and running that you're missing, it actually becomes quite substantial and something that you would really want to look into. So that I would like to move on to the next slide, I guess, please. Application encryption. Mentioned this earlier. I know we all know what application encryption is, or we should be semi-familiar with it. Basically, it's the top level of the OSI model. The OSI model is a model that is a standard model for integrating devices, networks, and everything from the top down, the lowest layer being level 1, transport, which is kind of your bits and bytes, to the application, which is the top layer, which is level 7, which is where all your data starts. So normally we usually discuss the layer 3 or the layer 2. And in our cellular devices, we're basically adding that layer of encryption at the layer 2 level. And when you segment your network, you're looking at the layer 3 level. And so now we're bringing into, a suggested, bringing it to the application layer. That's usually not necessary in a corporate environment because it's all in the private network. However, it's something that just becomes a standard practice as a good thing to do. So putting all of these together again, we went from the highest of having your own private network all the way down to having a virtual connection, to segmenting your networks and actually you could utilize those VPNs to get into the segmented networks so that your remote users are not coming directly into the whole enterprise network, and then ensuring that that data is encrypted at the application level. Putting all that together, I would like to hand it over to Dan, and Dan can now talk about some of the real world experiences that Sierra and us have been challenged with, and some of the ways they've overcome it, and some of the benefits that we can bring to you. So again, thank you guys for your time today. And Danny, thank you for allowing us to be here.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you, Danny and Mission Critical for hosting this webinar and allowing us to be a part of it. Thanks to Access Wireless Data Solutions and Dave Schwarz for sponsoring this opportunity to present. Dave and I go back a few years now, and Dave and I always joke about 5G. We've gone from David and I have looked at 3G to 4G to 5G. He goes back to 2G, and we pretty regularly joke with one another that we're probably on our last 5G or on our last G. So hoping not to see 6 coming forward anytime soon in our career path. We're both getting long in the tooth. But with that, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things we've seen in the field, how we've responded, solutions that we've responded with. I remember just over a year ago, I was in the beautiful city of Atlanta, and I was actually having lunch, and I received this call and email. It was on a Tuesday, first week of March, and said everyone's to return from travel immediately and go home and await further instructions pending COVID-19 additional information. So I called my boss at the time, and I said, does that mean just finish this trip and go home? He says, no, that means finish your lunch and head to the airport and get home. So it's been a long haul getting to this point in time, but we've made it through it, and we're now kind of moving into the next phase, and that's opening up our communities, and that will bring a whole new set of circumstances for us to deal with. On the front end, that first week of March, I remember on a Friday night about 6 o'clock, I got a panic call from a customer that needed 20 MG90 devices to set up a emergency response tent for patient health care as it pertained to COVID response. We were able to get those MG90s, deliver them overnight to the customer, and they had their tent up and running by Monday, as was their goal. But we continued to see calls like that, and then we moved into testing, and that required additional assistance. Once we got into the testing, how were we going to get internet to students, and how were we going to get internet to these remote test centers? Just all kinds of use cases coming forward on how we're going to support various operations. Presented a great opportunity for us to really showcase our products, and I think we've responded appropriately in all cases. But healthcare was a primary focus for us initially, whether that healthcare be from a healthcare facility or patient treatment facility, or whether it be to the first responders that were taking patients to those facilities, or doing test sites or quick remote healthcare treatment centers. We needed to get communications into each and every one of those sites and get it in effectively. So we leveraged often our MG90, which is a dual Wi-Fi and dual cellular device. It allows customers to leverage pretty much anything. But the beautiful part of dual cellular is you could run 2 carriers simultaneously, and it allows you to take advantage of the best available network at any given time. You can also interface fiber, or you could interface satellite communications to the device and create a failover scenario either on the MP70 or MG90 into the cellular world. So it gave communication to the Department of Defense, healthcare facilities, emergency first responders, really at the drop of a hat. They just had to deploy it, get it operational, get power to it, and they were off and running. So 2 great products that allowed us to get through that initial phase of COVID. Next slide, please. So the next big issue besides the healthcare side came in terms of what do we do with newfound workers working from home. For me, I'm a remote employee as it stands. So I just came home and came to my standard desk, my standard office, and everything was ready to go. For a lot of the workers in our facilities, all over the world, they were pushed to homebound workers and really had no capability. And we had a lot of customers in that same predicament that needed connectivity almost immediately. Many have connectivity through their home internet, but others did not. Other companies needed secure devices where they knew that the device would only connect to their secure device and keep the data secure from the endpoint all the way into the corporate network environment. And you know, obviously through, as Thomas talked about, private networks, some of the other capabilities that are built into our devices that we can hold the VPNs from the endpoint all the way into the customer network. Those were sought after devices. So working from home, all of a sudden 911 centers are being evacuated in the early days because we didn't know what surface contact issues were related. So we needed call takers, needed to have communication capability at the drop of a hat. So all our devices, the RV55, MP70, MG90, are FirstNet ready devices, can operate on band 14. They're Verizon certified devices that can operate in Verizon Public Safety and as well as in T-Mobile Public Safety, and can also leverage any North American regional carrier. So I have a couple of regional carriers in the Southeast that do a fair amount of, or actually a large amount of government access work. So we were faced with all these use cases, and our team was pretty diligent in making sure inventory was available early on, which was very beneficial for our operations. Next slide. Utilities became another infrastructure need and requirement. Most of the utility folks, work on site, manage their grid on site, and those necessary employees still remained on site, but as many as possible were moved to homebound operational capability and went on site when they needed that access. So MG90, MP70, RV55 all became sought after products for solutions to manage in utilities call center type capabilities, or put additional monitoring in the field. How do we secure sensitive information or customer payment information? And then in the middle of COVID, we have what Thomas talked about, CBRS was was released. The Spectrum auction was last July. And, you had the schools paying for carrier airtime, now looking at CBRS, utilities looking at CBRS, many different applications now looking to CBRS in ways to potentially reduce their long-term costs. Some of the agencies had their own tower infrastructure and other capabilities built into the system. So they could put that CBRS infrastructure, at least the core infrastructure, on those towers and in those data centers that pre-existed. The same held true for schools as well. And we have since, in the first 6 to 10 months of CBRS, we've been involved in multiple deployments from the east to the west. The earliest one was probably in the state of Florida, and we're currently involved with some as far west as California today. So it's pretty much all over the country. A lot of it driven by schools and utilities, but other agencies and communities looking at it as well. It's a long-term investment. It's provided by companies like Motorola. Some of the carrier companies will provide infrastructure, but some of the manufacturers have already built infrastructure solutions that can be deployed within their communities and build out quickly. Next slide. And then we had police and fire working in the field around the clock. Last summer was kind of a turbulent time for many locations in the US. And as you might suspect, there was more need, more desire to document what was happening with officers on the street. And we've seen a real surge in body-worn video and in-car video for protection of the officers and to get valid data from those types of contacts that are highly sensitive. We have built out really the three products, the MG90, RV55, and MP70, to handle video offload, whether the police department wants to bring that video offload into the police precinct or station and offload via Wi-Fi, or today we can also stream that video from the police vehicle to a cloud storage application. And the police command and control can also look into certain aspects of the video and see the live feed from the field in certain aspects of what's being captured. All our devices comply with whether it be AT&T FirstNet or Verizon Public Safety or T-Mobile Public Safety. We can operate efficiently in any one of those application environments from a carrier standpoint, and they're very capable of supporting heavy data load applications across cellular. Next slide. So you take all these applications in the field, the needs, the wants. The next big thing is, particularly with schools, we had school districts buying 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 endpoint devices for students and teachers. How do we, 1,000 call center devices for maybe a utility call center environment or some other business call center environment? How do we manage those endpoint devices? We can't go to everyone's home. We can't get the device to be brought in. So our solution does have AirLink management service or AirLink mobility manager, where you can manage the devices over the air from a remote location, from IT, inside of the IT department, or even a remote employee that's connected to IT can manage the configuration, can manage the application, access the endpoints, and manage and service those devices upgrade firmware. All that can be managed over the air online. It can be scheduled for a time where maybe that person that has the device is off, and they can push those upgrades or those changes to the devices over the air. But in the middle, you got to have some type of protection to secure that network. And we have a product called AirLink Connection Manager. It's our VPN appliance. A lot of customers have their own VPN solutions, which work just fine. But for those customers that needed something quick and to get that network up and running, say for a school district that needed to get a bunch of devices deployed to the field, if they didn't have a VPN, we have the product in place to assist that customer with giving them that VPN and network security, so the students are not going where they shouldn't go with that device and viewing things they shouldn't view, and your employees are doing the same. So it protects the device, it protects the network, and it protects from people doing certain things that obviously you don't want them to do. And again, servicing those endpoint devices through those gateways are also important. And then we have a professional services group that primarily for many years has been an on-site deploy things in customers' networks or help build a configuration file for a gateway. Overnight, they basically became experts in doing remote professional services, setting devices up, setting VPNs up through remote access. And our customers, are all very understanding, but now they've become professionals at doing this remotely and quickly and efficiently. I think I have a new degree in using web access tools such as GoToMeeting or Zoom, Teams. I think I've tried them all during this past year, and they're all very interesting and all very unique, but they're all much needed tools, and some have additional capabilities over other, and we've learned them all. So it was quick for us to ramp up. But the good news is the customers at the end of the day can still secure their network, manage their network, and deploy devices through remote resources. Next slide. Our AirLink Mobility Manager, what we call AMM, which is to the far right, it can be on-prem, it can be in the cloud, it's the customer's choice. So for many customers, on-prem is absolutely critical, especially critical infrastructure customers. AMM for their mobility aspects, so maybe in a utility company, it's the bucket trucks, the service vehicles, those types of things that have a gateway or router built into the vehicle network environment. We can manage those over the air using AMM. AM is more of a fixed or static device deployment. So maybe it's a SCADA device or some type of well monitoring device or a gate controller, anything that might be fixed in the field where you don't necessarily need mobility tools. Like where did this vehicle travel, or where, how fast was it going? This is fixed, it's on a pole. So we sell a different version of that, can be on-prem or cloud-based, and it handles all of our devices can go in that platform. And then the third and final, in the cloud only, is our ALMS or AirLink Management Service. That comes free the first year with the purchase of any device, along with our support. So any AirLink device, except for the MG90, when you purchase an AirLink device, so MP70, RV55, RV50X, any of those devices, our management service comes free with that product the first year, and as does support, 24/7, 365 support. So I think one of the very beneficial tools we've built into this is we've given customers a way to manage these devices. And additionally, we've given them the support in the background through our human resources and our support department to get them up and operational as quickly as possible. And that was some of the success in getting these quick deploy healthcare facilities or helping law enforcement deploy a video solution or LPR solution in the field, kind of on the fly and in a hurry. Next slide. So what happens next? Now we're kind of moving into the next phase where I don't want to say we're back to normal, but we're kind of edging toward normal. And normal is based on, I guess, where you live today, how far you've gone down that path. I'm in Florida, so I think we're a little further down the path in terms of moving back to a more normal pre-COVID atmosphere. But what do I do with all these assets? Well, the MP70, MG90, RV55 all have band 48 or CBRS capability built into them. And we're finding a lot of customers now are converting those devices as they make the move into building out CBRS networks. They're repurposing those devices to work inside those networks. So schools, when they needed rapid deployment of student devices to communities that were underserved or didn't have internet capability in those communities, they were either putting a bus out there with a gateway on it or giving the student a gateway to work within their home environment. Now they want to move from spending cellular airtime with the customer or with the carrier. They feel they can justify the long-term expense of having their own network. And many of the school districts, cities, Department of Transportation folks are moving to these networks and they're repurposing those devices. From a primary internet, right now I'm speaking to you on no ad for Comcast here, but I use Comcast as my home-based internet service. But I have a Sierra Wireless MP70 connected to that modem for failover capability. So if my internet went out, I'd have a minor little hiccup, probably half a second or so. It would switch over to cellular, and I would be still carrying on with my presentation. So a lot of places that have purchased additional assets are now using that for internet failover or remote asset monitoring from home internet. Next slide. During this time, we continued to develop new technology. We're releasing a new operating system later this year called AirLink OS. All our products will operate on AirLink OS moving forward. You'll find that there's a lot of additional capability built into AirLink OS once it's released. And I think our customers are going to be very excited about a little bit of change, and plus we're unifying our platform. The XR series will be released in another month or so. That will be a true 5G deployment, a kind of a change in some of our higher end devices and how we go to market with those devices. So I think there's some exciting news to come on those releases. We expect the first XR to be out sometime in Q2, which is coming soon. And the second device either late Q2 or early Q3. So this year is going to be an exciting year for us. And of course, 5G is now being built into most, if not all, our product offerings. And we're very happy to be the first to market with a true 5G Cat 20 module in the MG90. So that's available for sale today. And we have customers actually purchasing the devices, deploying the devices. We get asked a lot, is 5G a safe bet to kind of bite into today? And the answer is yes. With a 5G Cat 20 module, you still have LTE capability, so it'll work in the 4G environment. And when 5G is available, it'll work in 5G. When it's not available in a particular area, it'll fall back to 4G. So again, very exciting time for us, and we're glad to be first to market as we normally are with our new advances with our carriers. So next slide. So with that, We have about 15 minutes left in the webinar. We'll probably open that up for questions. Again, thank you for listening. Thank you for taking the time to join the webinar. And Danny, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of monitor for the questions.
Great, thank you, Dan. And as that was great material for both of you, so we appreciate you sharing that information with us. And as Dan said, we'll now begin the question and answer session. We've already gotten some great questions so far, but it's not too late to type your question. Remember, you can just type it into the question pane at any time, and we'll go through those questions. So the first question is, in my office, 10 people are doing a half-in, half-out office schedule. We are having issues with staying connected to the network when working from home. What can we do about it?
Hey, Danny, this is Thomas. I'll take that question, I think. What I would suggest there, first of all, it's going to be difficult because not knowing, you're going to have to do a little bit of research. I guess the first thing I would do is maybe get those people in the office. Anyways, no, to have issues remotely, one of the things that you would want to do if you can't manipulate their internet service provider, or you have no management over their internet service provider, is you may want to look at some sort of failover connectivity. As Dan mentioned recently, he's working from home. As I guess I didn't bring it up, but technically I'm working remotely as well. I have a RV50 here as my backup, and I'm using Spectrum as my landline. But anyways, that would be my suggestion, would be some sort of failover device put in place, in that if the main internet is going down or having issues with the connection, looking for the best quality of connection, you put in that cellular device in between, and it'll keep you up so that the end user would be transparent if there's any network issues on either network. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, Thomas, just to add to that, I think it's imperative to do some research on if you're going to do a failover device, to make sure you're aligning with a carrier that can provide you with the best possible throughput and connectivity for wherever that remote employee lives. So it may not be a one size fits all. You may have to use multiple carriers to service that population within your work environment.
Great, thank you both for that information. That was great information. So our next question is, you mentioned CBRS when you were talking about private LTE. I thought CBRS was part of 5G.
Danny, again, that's another great question. I think Dan elaborated on a little bit after I did, but that is absolutely correct. 5G does incorporate CBRS as well as private LTE. With the onset of 5G coming at us, 5G is actually taking 4G to the nth level by adding new proprietary adding new frequencies. So the 4G frequencies currently there are going to be what's called the sub-6, or the lower frequencies, and then there will be the new CBRS frequencies, which are in the 3.5, 3.7 range, and then there's going to be the millimeter wave, which is coming out as well. Now, millimeter wave is being deployed, but on a small fraction at this point. But CBRS, because of the way that it is being utilized and the way that the spectrum is being utilized, it is both for a private network and for 5G. So it will be utilized for both areas. Thank you for that question. Dan, you want to add anything? Appreciate it.
Sure. I would just say that, you can, most of the customers that got priority access license, or what we refer to as PALs, they went out and bid on Spectrum. I think it was back in July was the auction. But that didn't close the door to folks that didn't necessarily go out and get Spectrum. So there's general authorized access licenses available for individuals that can use unused spectrum inside that band 48 band. So you can use that unused spectrum. Obviously, the incumbent user can always come back and reclaim it, but that would probably only happen, in a severe operational situation for the Navy or another federal agency. So those licenses are also available. So the federal government really did a good job of giving you a private license pathway and still being able to use a general access license that you did not have to bid on. So both are available.
Excellent. Thank you both. That was more great information. So our next question is, we have recently purchased MG90s and are wondering if our investment is secure moving forward and we have not yet reached an end of life situation.
No, so there's no announced end of life on MG90, first and foremost. And we normally announce end of sale first, which has not been announced, and there's no plans to announce it. We're still showing it on our product map through 2025. And then when we do announce an end of sale, we generally continue to support it for another 3 years post end of sale. So, you know, if we were to announce next year, you'd still have many, many years to come. In addition to operationally, 4G is not going away. It's going to be the core network for all the carriers for some time to come. And you'll always be able to operate the MG90 in those networks, you know, through the life cycle of that product.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan. Thanks for clarifying that. And now our next question is, we have multiple VPNs in our environment to secure the various aspects of our communications. Do the MP70 and MG90 support multiple VPNs?
I'll just say the answer to that is yes. MP70, I'm doing it off the top of my head, I think is 5 simultaneous VPNs can be supported off the MP70. On the MG90, you can support 10 simultaneous VPNs. So I've never had anybody get up to 5 yet, but you know, 10 I've definitely never seen. But Thomas, you may want to add to that as well.
Usually on the VPNs, when we're establishing them, we're not doing more than three to 5 on a device. So I've never actually, in the lab, I've never actually tested it to push it to see what it would actually, you know, lock out at. But you know, it's again, it's looking at the switch behind it, what particular device you're looking at, the carrier. A VPN is definitely not something that we would suggest kind of overloading. So, I mean, I would suggest maybe multiple devices for multiple VPNs versus doing, you know, 100 VPNs on one device.
Great.
Yeah, that's a great point, because every VPN has a fair amount of overhead it has to have for bandwidth allocation. So.
Great, thank you both. That's great information. Our next question is, are the 5G devices, so the MG90 5G and the XR series, backward compatible?
When you say backward compatible, I'm going to make an assumption that backward compatible into 4G, and the answer is yes. Those devices will operate in a 4G network if 5G is not present. Great.
Thank you. And then our next question is, does AWDS support cellular, IoT, LoRaWAN, Sigfox, or other LPWA protocols?
Now, thanks, Dan. From AWDS's perspective, we can help the customer or the client with those particular protocols. AWDS is not necessarily a supporter of. We stick mainly with the cellular devices and try to stick with the cellular network. The protocols on the devices that run behind that or over different areas, we don't necessarily touch on so much. But I do believe from a low power perspective that Sierra has several devices that would fit into that category, such as the RV50. But you know, at a high level, we try to stay at the cellular point and not get into the other protocols, as again, those are kind of behind the cellular or off to the other side of the network.
Okay, great. And then another question we have is, are your products compatible with Mimosa networks?
I'll have to take that as an action item, Danny. I'll have to look into that. I don't think I've ever been presented with that question before.
Okay, great. We will we'll take that under advisement and get an answer out to that attendee. Otherwise, that's all the time we have for today. Like with that question, if we didn't get to your question, we'll work to get the answers to your questions and follow up as soon as we can. And that's all the time we have for today. Again, a recording of the webinar will be emailed to all registrants and will be available at www.mccmag.com. And a certificate of attendance will also be attached to that email. Thank you again to our presenters and our attendees, and to Sierra Wireless and Access Wireless Data Solutions for serving as the sponsors. That concludes our webinar. Have a great rest of your day.